If you're black, you have to have a skull shaped like so-and-so. This skull is not like that. This nigger is not black. It's amazing. You see some of these debates, you want to really know. These are highly intelligent people, like Vorkuta, for whom I have an enormous respect at UNESCO in 1974 in Cairo. He said, okay, it is quite clear that the writing is African, the culture is African, the techno-complex as Soderbergh has showed us is African, the languages Diop has showed us is African. We still have the problem, how many of these people are African? It's a very serious matter, because you would think that as one becomes wiser and wiser and more academic and more scientific, that you lose this emotional attachment to things. No, sir. When it comes to power, thank you. When it comes to power relationships, and when it comes to being challenged deep inside the system, right in one's guts, one does not sleep at night, knowing that you are crushing and oppressing a brother who is not only equal, but who at one time had given you critical elements in your civilization. You cannot sleep with that, therefore you have to prove to your satisfaction so that you can sleep peacefully again, that that is not really a brother. It's just like when I was in Guyana, I heard of this marvelous man, this South African, very liberal South African. Strange how I forget these names of these hypocrites. What is it? Schweitzer? Yes. He said, the Negro is my brother, but he's my younger brother by several centuries. What a beautiful phrase. And we really took that. We thought that was really a compliment. At least even though we were his younger brother by several, we were still his brother. So we felt we had joined the human family again. That is the horror of it. And we find when we go through Spanish history, no major Spanish scholar will allow you to talk about the Moors for more than half an hour. They get angrier and angrier. That is one aspect of European history that is swept under the carpet. They would not talk about that because that has haunted the generation after generation, the Spanish, the Sicilians, the Portuguese. It haunted them for centuries because the Moors did not just go in and come out. The Moors went in 711 AD. They were not totally defeated until 1492. The Moorish occupation of Europe was longer than the European slave trade. But it was not a slave trade like the European. When the Moors entered Europe, they did not destroy its culture. They did not stop the people from speaking their language. They did not put them in chains. They did not take them out of schools. They did not rid them of their sense of humanity. They did not rid them of the sense of equality. So do not compare the Moorish conquest with the European conquest of Africa. Because it's a one thing to invade, as I told you, when the Greeks invaded Egypt, it was a different type of invasion. They took it over, yes, and for a while they controlled it, but they didn't seek to destroy its culture. They fed on it. They were enriched by it. And we will see the story of the Moors as an enrichment of Europe. Europe, because of the Black Death and of things that went before that and after that, had fallen into a dark age. Greece and Rome, the glory of Greece and Rome had faded. And when the Africans and Arabs attacked Europe in 711 AD, Europe had two universities. The Muslims, the Muslim Moors, the Islamic Moors, introduced 17 universities in Europe. 17. Europe had two. Europe was 99% illiterate. 99% illiterate. Even some of the medieval European kings and queens did not write or read. But who are the Moors? How did this all start? It started in a sense with Muhammad. Therefore, we have to say something about him. Who is he? Muhammad, like Jesus, was a very extraordinary man. He transcended the race or sect in which he was born. He developed a universal religion. First of all, he accepted Jesus. Jesus, by the way, is part of the pantheon of prophets in Islam. They did not reject Jesus. Muhammad saw Jesus as a great prophet. He only saw himself as the last of the prophets. Muhammad also encouraged commerce. That attracted the townspeople. Muhammad insisted on equality and brotherhood among all men. He made a black man his right-hand man, Bilal. And he actually talked to the fair-skinned Arabs, because they were both dark-skinned and fair-skinned Arabians, that they should not treat their darker brethren with contempt. He insisted on racial equality, and he established that in his own life by making Bilal his black right-hand man. Muhammad also insisted on conquest, that we should go out into the world and conquer it, not destroy the people, but teach them a new life, bring them that religion. And he also did not seek to destroy the indigenous cultures, where he saw an indigenous culture where the Muslims entered and they saw indigenous culture. Even though they would bring their ideas, they did not completely seek to swing it around. For example, when in Walata, for example, one of the African places where Ibn Battuta visited, he went in and found that even though the Africans call themselves Muslims and they observed the festival days and various things, they still kept up their own cultural observances side by side. It's very important to note that, because many people wonder, why did Islam become so powerful? Because Islam has more converts than Christianity. It's hard to believe that, but it is true. And at that time in the world, Muhammad was just as unfortunate as Jesus. He was born among very bigoted little people, narrow-minded people. Now, I'm not saying anything against the Arabs or the Jews. People are people. People are usually narrow-minded and bigoted until a great leader arises among them and transforms them. Muhammad, in fact, nearly lost his life, because the little warring Arab tribes did not fully understand the nature of his mission, and some of them tried to kill him. Where did he flee? Into Ethiopia. And there, the beginning of the years in Islamic time begin, 622 AD, the time of the flight known as the Hegira. Now, the birth of Muhammad was around 571 AD, the flight was around 622, and he died in 632 AD. After he died, a fight broke out among the Muslims, because the Sunnis and the Shiites, there was a quarrel about hereditary succession and succession by merit, etc. And as a result of that, they split. That split has haunted the Muslim world up to this day. The Sunnis and the Shiites. And you will see how, in fact, it was to affect the Moorish occupation. Now, the Arabians then charged down into various parts of the world. Now, what was Africa at that time? Africa, the Moorish, most of the Moors, the Arabians came down into parts of Africa and started to try to turn people into Muslims. Some Africans resisted, some of them accepted Islam. Some of them, the kings would